I actually publish another missing persons podcast. Did you know that? It's called Found, but it's only available to supporters on Patreon and YouTube. What is it? What format is it? How is it different from the podcast that comes out every Friday? Well, you will get all those questions and more answered today, as I've picked out one of Found's previous episodes for public consumption. I'm Ed Dunsel, and this is Unfound. I came up with the idea of Found about 2.5 years ago. I think the first episode came out in March of 2023, pretty sure. Why did I do this? Why did I heap more work upon myself voluntarily? Well, the reasoning was a combination of things. I wanted to add some value to the subscriptions of the people who were already supporting Unfound on Patreon and YouTube. However, I didn't want it to be something that was kind of a throwaway, something that wasn't helpful or informative. And I came upon the idea of examining disappearances that had been resolved. How were they resolved? Why were they resolved? What can we learn from the resolved cases that can be applied to all the unresolved ones featured on the main podcast? And truthfully, this may be the most important part of everything we do. Are we learning anything to resolve disappearances? Hence, Found was born, and I particularly love the logo. I started with Brandon Lawson, but others that have been featured include Elizabeth Smart, J.C. Dugard, and I even took a look at why the Titanic took 73 years to be found. The episodes come out every month, so I've done about 25 of them now. I really enjoy it. So what is Found's format? Well, I'll get to that in a moment. Unfound News. I got interviewed by a writer from A&E this past Monday. They started a new website where I think they are going to be featuring notable people within true crime media. We talked for an hour. I will let you know when the article is published. Next, I've bought a couple of books. One is allegedly somehow connected to the disappearance of Ray Gricar. The other one is a disappearance textbook from the UK written by a professor. I will give reviews of both when I've completed them. Finally, I have a new website. Please check it out. missingpersonsconsulting.com. Yes, really. Okay, I want to go over the format of Found before you hear the episode I completed earlier this year for the disappearance to discovery of Gary Devore. There are 3 parts of every episode of Found. The first part is the disappearance. Who was the person? What were the circumstances? And seemingly, why wasn't it resolved immediately? The second part is the intervening years, that period between the disappearance happening and the resolution to the disappearance. It doesn't matter if it's 2 months or, like the Titanic, 73 years. Then the third part, the last part, the discovery. How did the resolution come about? By investigation, by luck? Was it a combination of things? Within each of those sections, I do 2 things. I read articles I find on newspapers.com to get an idea of what was said at each phase of the mystery. How was the disappearance portrayed when it happened? What was said about it during the intervening years? And how did everyone react once it was resolved? And the second thing I do within all those 3 sections is I look at it like an NTSB investigator would explain a plane crash, with one main factor than several contributing factors. Trust me, this will all make sense as you listen to the following recording I made for the disappearance to discovery of Hollywood screenwriter Gary Devore. And I should note, I picked this case because it has a little bit of everything that we've experienced over the past 9 years of Unfound. A missing car, wild rumors of foul play, suspicion pointed toward a spouse, someone driving late at night, a person kind of down on his luck, an amateur citizen who decided to get involved. Like I said, a little bit of everything. Hello, all you Patreon and YouTube people. How are all of you doing? I have a found episode for you here, and this is one of those disappearances to discoveries that you would think that I would have heard of this. But I haven't. I don't know how it has slipped through my knowledge. I'm going to guess that some of you have heard this disappearance, especially if you are in the Southern California area. Maybe if you're outside of there, maybe not. But given who this person was and what he did and everything, I just think that I should have known about this, especially now that I've been doing this for 9 years, but I didn't. And it's kind of came across it within the last few days in preparing the next, of course, found episode, which one is a good one for the end of July, the beginning of August, and I found it. And that is the disappearance to discovery of Gary Devore, Devore. He was 55 years old. He was last seen in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was driving back to his home in Carpinteria, California, which is on the coast north of Santa Barbara, and never made it. This is a disappearance that even he has his own Wikipedia page, because I wouldn't call him famous, but he was involved in Hollywood and wrote screenplays for some movies that you have surely seen. You might remember Running Scared. That was the movie with Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal from the mid-'80s. Remember, it had maybe the song that was in it is more famous than the movie. It was the song Sweet Freedom by Michael McDonald. I think that movie came out in 1986, if you're a Michael McDonald fan or Doobie Brothers fan. And then he also wrote the script for Raw Deal, one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's movies from the 1980s that didn't do as big as the Terminator movies or some of the other movies that he did back then. But it made some money. It made more than its budget, but it was not a hit by any means. But Gary Devore wrote the screenplay for Raw Deal. He was also kind of an uncredited script writer for the movies Passenger 57 with Wesley Snipes, Time Cop, Sudden Death, which was a movie that was actually filmed in my former hometown, or near my hometown, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and also the 1997 movie The Relic, which might have been the last one he worked on before he went missing. But he had worked on some game shows, including the Newlywed Game. But he went missing, and then he was found, and we're going to take a look at all of it. So here is the setup. And I'm taking this from Wikipedia, and then I'm going to read a few articles that were written right at the time that he went missing. You know how what we do here at this point. Devore disappeared in June 1997 while driving at night from Santa Fe, New Mexico to Santa Barbara, California, prompting an extensive search and media speculation. Devore had been working in his office in Santa Fe, I think I said Albuquerque earlier, Santa Fe, New Mexico, trying to finish a script. Devore had recently complained of writer's block, and so he had decided to change his environment. When he finally finished the script, Devore decided to drive home through the Mojave Desert. His wife, Wendy, was waiting for him at their beachfront house in Carpinteria, California. When she did not hear from him, she decided to call around 1 a.m. It was later discovered the call had not been recorded by the telephone company for whatever reason. But Gary answered, but was not very specific on his location. This was the last time Wendy spoke with him. Now, you should know, I know this area of the country very well. I've been on these roads, Route 40, going out into the desert, going up north of California. Of course, some of this driving, especially once you get over to the 15 and then keep going west, not going down into LA. Very desolate. And at the time, of course, cell phone service in the 1990s, I don't know how great it would be. And that is a pretty lonely drive, especially if you're doing it at night. And like I said, many times driving around that area when I lived in Las Vegas. So that is where he was going. From Santa Fe, New Mexico, of course, he would have to cross the entire state of Arizona to then get into California to get home. And even then, he's going north of LA, at least an hour or more, and right along the coast. So he's going across all of California too, although California is not that really wide of a state. It's just long but not wide. So let me read some articles now about what people had to say or media had to say at the time regarding his disappearance. And yes, he was missing, as was his vehicle. So this is an article from June 30th of 1997. It is from the Santa Barbara News Press. So this was written just a couple days after he went missing. So let's take a look at this article. The sheriff's office in Santa Barbara County is assisting in the search for a Carpinteria man who failed to return home as scheduled from a desert trip. Last Sunday, the department said that Gary Devore was still unaccounted for. Devore was scheduled to return home early Saturday. According to a deputy at the sheriff's Carpinteria substation, he was reportedly near Barstow about 1 a.m. when he telephoned his family and said he would be arriving in Carpinteria at about 4 a.m. When he had not arrived home by Saturday evening, his family reported that he was missing. The deputy said the California Highway Patrol and other law enforcement agencies along his believed route of travel have been notified. So once again, this is from June 30th of 1997. He went missing on June 28th of 1997. So here's an article from the San Francisco Examiner from July 14th of 1997. So it's a couple weeks now after he went missing. The headline is Screenwriter's Worried Wife and Pals Fear Worst. Gary Devore went missing June 28th from a road trip. Santa Barbara County, so excited he couldn't wait to get home and start work. Screenwriter Gary Devore called his wife several times by cellular phone as he drove through the night across the Mojave Desert. Now, you already notice there's some discrepancies about how many times he called and if he really said where he was. I'm not particularly suspicious of any of that. Devore was returning from New Mexico, where he had been bouncing ideas off his old friend, actress Marsha Mason. He told his wife he had made a creative breakthrough on a script for a movie he was about to direct, a remake of the 1949 Robert Mitchum film, The Big Steal. Wendy Oates Devore got a call from him after midnight, June 28th, saying he was about 3 hours away, but somewhere along the way to their beachfront home, the screenwriter vanished. This has been sheer terror, a tearful Devore said. You are terrified that you can't get to him in time. You're so frightened that he needs you, and he's sure you're coming. He had to believe I was going to find him. She, his wife, says, turned to private detectives, air and ground searchers, bloodhounds, and even psychics. Family and friends believe the 55-year-old Devore fell victim to a carjacking or other foul play. They don't think he dozed off and crashed. His new white Ford Explorer would be visible. They rule out the possibility that he has abandoned his wife of 1.5 years. He was crazy about her, said friend Andy Howard, who's been keeping vigil with his wife. They were still on their honeymoon. He would never do that to her. Although he had legal problems, they discount suicide. Gary's not the kind of guy who would go and off himself. He's this tough macho man. He's like the Marlboro Man. Devore vanished 11 days after the disappearance of another California writer, playwright Gregory Howells. Remember, we covered that disappearance on Unfound, remember? Had his wife on. It's been at least 4 years now. Whose last apparent traces are a putter and an iron left with his golf cart on the 13th green of a Carmel Valley course he certainly left on his own. In House's case, however, his wife of 10 years, actress Sherry Glazer, has said he may have staged his disappearance, that he may have abandoned her and her two children. He went and committed suicide somewhere. There was still no word on Howells of Sunday, said his mother-in-law, Shelley Glazer. Nobody believes Devore would do such a thing, although not well known to the public. He is well regarded in Hollywood. His credits include the Christopher Walken film Dogs of War and the Gregory Hines Billy Crystal action picture Running Scared. His latest project was his biggest, RKO's remake of The Big Steal. For help, Devore turned to Marcia Mason, his friend of a decade, and drove to her home in Santa Fe on June 23rd. There were problems he was having and wanted to use Marcia to help him, send Wendy Devore 50. He also needed some reassurance because he was taking the reins of a movie for the first time. Devore called his wife on June 26th, saying he was coming home because he had broken the back of the story, allowing the entire script to fall together. So there you go. Those are a couple articles written about his disappearance. And to remind all of you, he and his new white Ford Explorer were missing. So let's take a look at this, the disappearance. What is the main reason? What is the main factor for his disappearance and this not being solved right away? Well, it's tough to say, maybe to the public, but you are all, of course, you're a supporter of Unfound on YouTube. You're a supporter of Unfound on Patreon. I would say that you're better educated than the average Unfound listener, and I appreciate, of course, all the support that you continue to give Unfound. But I think we would all think, if this were 1997 all over again, and we had the experience back then that we have now, we're thinking, well, he and his vehicle probably together. And although his friends and family think that that was foul play or he got carjacked and everything, I do not believe we would be thinking that. Certainly a possibility, but statistically, not very likely. Now, it very well may be that maybe he was planning to off himself, and there's a lot of area out there in the Southwest United States. But I think would think that he and his vehicle were together. And I don't think that we would be thinking it was a suicide. I think that we would maybe be thinking that he maybe fell asleep behind the wheel or something. So I think the main reason, we would say the main factor in his disappearance was he somehow lost control of his car. Although we could not be totally factually sure of that. So then what would be the contributing factors if we would think that? Well, I think we'd be looking at he's driving at night, very desolate area of the United States, a lot fewer cars on the road. So if he were to fall asleep at the wheel and veer off, less people out there to see that happen. I think we might also have to be open to the idea, could he have been drinking? Could he have been doing drugs? I'm not necessarily saying illegal drugs, but could he have been taking some sort of upper energy pill to keep him awake because he knew that he was going to be driving through the night? And what was his mental state? And you should know that although it's not in these two articles or in the Wikipedia page, but you will find reputable sources that say that one of the talks he had with his wife while he was driving, he said he was pumping pure adrenaline. To me, this sounds like he might have been on drugs, speed, or something like that. Doesn't necessarily have to be illegal. But if he really was talking like that, I don't know, at 3 a.m. or something, and he says he's pumping pure adrenaline, that's not natural. But whatever the case, the main factor, I think we would think that, well, He's probably with his vehicle, probably wrecked. Maybe he swerved to miss a deer or an armadillo or something on the road. Could be a lot of different reasons. So there you go. That is the disappearance, and I think what we would be thinking at the time that this disappearance wasn't solved in a few days. Let's now take a look at the intervening time. Now, you should know this disappearance was solved in about a year, and it's really weird that he and his vehicle, not to ruin it, but he and his vehicle were found almost exactly a year after he went missing. But let's now take a look what people were saying in the time that he was missing. And this was one of the interesting points. This does not commonly happen, and it's the exact reason I wanted to read it for you. But this comes from the Santa Barbara News Press from October 11th. Remember, he went missing at the end of June, so we're now October. What would that be? July, August, September. 3.5 months after his disappearance. And it says, still missing. And it says, now that 13 weeks have passed since the mysterious disappearance of Carpinteria screenwriter Gary Devore, the family has withdrawn its $100,000 reward for information. You just hardly ever see this. Or maybe if it does happen, it's hardly ever made public. Interesting. It continues, we are forced to conclude that the reward offered has not been helpful, a spokesperson said. I got to tell you, that takes a lot of courage to do that. You know me and rewards. They don't work. I'm not saying it's never happened, but you get a lot of kooks, and especially when it comes to an Hollywood type, quote-unquote, famous or well-known and whatever else. Of course, this would have been the days before IMDb.com and all that. But, you know, you have all those Hollywood types, and I'm going to get into that later. Finding out that he's missing, just looking for a break, they'll do anything. And so I give them all the credit in the world to admit, you know what, this isn't working. As I continue to say, I'm for what works. I'm not for what doesn't work. So this was interesting. You hardly ever read something like this. Very interesting. This next article is from the day after Christmas of 1997, so we're like 6 months later. Once again, from the Santa Barbara News Press. The headline is, Screenwriter's Vanishing Continues to Haunt Wife. And there's a picture of Gary there. It says, it has been 6 months since Gary Devore, a Carpinteria-based screenwriter, disappeared into the night. At about 1 a.m. last June 28th, Devore called his wife, Wendy Oates Devore, from his car phone outside of Barstow to say he would be back at their Padaro Lane home by 5 that morning. That was the last time she heard his voice. Devore, then 55, coincidentally the age I turned today. It's weird how that works out. That was not planned, and yes, I am recording this on my birthday, August 1st of 2025. Devore, then 55, was returning from a week trip to Santa Fe, New Mexico. He had been working out the kinks in a script he had been struggling to finish. The bearded and ruggedly handsome Devore was set to direct his first movie this spring, a remake of the 1949 movie. We've already talked about that. Friends say the Hollywood writer had plenty to come home to, such as a good marriage and a skyrocketing career, but the telephone call was it. There has been not a word since. There also has been no sign of the newly leased 1997 Eddie Bauer edition Ford Explorer he was driving. His bank accounts haven't been drawn on. His credit cards haven't been used, nor has his cellular phone. He seemingly vanished into a clear desert night. End of story. Well, not quite. Devore left behind a wife who's still not been able to put this memory to rest and is not sure that she ever will. It feels like it couldn't be possible. The article continues. Hold on. Oops, I did not. It was just the first part of it. It seems I did not clip out from newspapers.com the rest of the article, but I think you get the idea. Really, not anything going on. So there was, in October, they pulled the $100,000 reward, didn't work. And now we have an article from the day after Christmas in the Santa Barbara Press, which is, of course, near Santa Barbara, near Carpinteria, where they're just saying, oh, everybody's confused. They don't know what to think, on and on and on. So there you go. Couple articles covering his disappearance, but it seems at this point nothing is being done. So, of course, this is the intervening time. What is the main factor in this disappearance continuing to not be solved 6 months after Gary was missing? What can we deduce from these articles and what we think we know about disappearances? Well, I think the main factor is I think they did all they could originally, and, after 6 months, they're just not sure what to do. The fact is that it's a long way from Santa Fe to Carpinteria. No, could they ping phones back then? Maybe they could. Maybe they could check where he was, but that doesn't mean he was telling the truth. That doesn't mean he couldn't have made a U-turn and gone right back out into the desert. It doesn't really mean much. I'm perfectly willing to believe his wife. I don't think looking at this, if this were 1997 all over again, he's missing, that I would be suspicious of his wife or anything. I think she'd be telling the truth. It's a long distance. A lot of places to go out there. And when you factor in what we've already stated, he's driving at night and he was pumping pure adrenaline. Main factor is not sure what to do. So what are contributing factors? Well, first of all, we have to remember that when people and their cars go missing, it does seem to be that these are the type of disappearances that are going to last a little longer than when a person just goes missing by his or herself. I don't know what the statistics are on that. But it's one of those deals where if a person isn't found in his or her car within a few days, this could be a disappearance that goes for a while. And so it's been 6 months. In Unfound's world, not that long. Contributing factor, not sure where he could be. Of course, contributing factor, not sure what happened, although I think that all of us back in 1997 have a firm grasp on it, although we would still be like, I don't know where they should be looking, but all we would be thinking was he and the car are together somewhere, maybe out in the desert, roll it over, who knows. It's a big area out there in the Southwest. He could be anywhere. What's interesting, though, unlike many other missing people that have been featured on this series found, Gary Devore was certainly not forgotten. Of course, we covered many disappearances that went for a lot longer than a year before they got solved, where years and years and years and years and years would go by. Nobody brings up, no news articles, nothing. Not mentioned at all. Whereas I found many articles written, between he went missing and when he and his vehicle were eventually found. Many. Nobody forgot about him. Of course, he knew a lot of people, a lot of influential people. In fact, there's one article that I didn't print out that detailed how Jean-Claude Van Damme and some other famous people actually got involved in the search, driving around out there looking for him. I mean, how odd is that? So we just have to remember, unsolved at the time, but that doesn't mean he was forgotten. People were certainly looking for him. It's just not sure what to do. How do you put a constructive search together in a situation like this? Well, you're going to find out eventually somebody did. So let's move to the discovery of Gary Devore. This is fascinating, and this is why I continue to believe that the public can play a really good role in solving disappearances if they don't get caught up in all the hype, and there was certainly a lot of hype regarding Gary's disappearance that I will get to eventually. Somebody thought about it constructively. I wouldn't necessarily say maybe logically, but certainly looked at his disappearance in a way that nobody else did. Let's get to the discovery. Now, what's interesting about this is in the Modesto Bee. Modesto is in Northern California, kind of in that area where the original Night Stalker was, that area. But this article was written right around the time that Gary was found. It's very interesting. And the article is, where in the world is Gary Devore? And it's a long article. I'm not going to read all of it. Screenwriter Gary Devore, who co-wrote, this came out once again on June 28th, so a year after he went missing, of 1998. Screenwriter Gary Devore has not been seen since vanishing in the Mojave Desert a year ago today while driving home from New Mexico. Some friends say the 55-year-old Devore, who was returning from a script meeting with the actress Marsha Mason, was depressed over his sagging career and tax troubles and simply walked away from it all. His wife of 1.5 years believes her husband was injured in an abduction and suffers from amnesia. And his publicist thinks Devore engineered his own disappearance with the help from the CIA in an attempt to become the main character in his script for the Big Steel remake of the 1949 Robert Mitchum movie. See, these Hollywood types are crazy. I'm living this nightmare that can't go away, says his wife, Wendy Oates Devore. I would love to give up because this is a very painful existence, but I can't. Wendy Devore was the last person to speak with her husband. He called from her near Barstow shortly after midnight on June 28th, 1997, to say he was about 3 hours away from their beachfront home in Carpinteria. And you've heard all that. Devore vanished without a trace. So did his new Explorer, crammed with cameras, a laptop computer, and horse riding equipment, I guess a saddle. Marsha Mason did not return phone calls seeking comment. Police say they have no clue as to what happened. Say investigators will continue to follow tips and leads. In the weeks following her husband's disappearance, Wendy hired private detectives, organized air and ground searches, and even sought the advice of psychics. She posted that reward that we talked about. Devore's publicist, Michael Sands, is convinced Devore engineered his own disappearance with the help of a friend in the CIA in his scheme to become the leading role in the Big Steel script as sort of a midlife adventure. Yeah. Devore's version of the movie took place during the 1989 U.S. invasion of Panama, where his hero would race across the country trying to catch Army intelligence officers who had robbed a Panamanian bank and made off with a secret CIA slush fund. I want to believe he's out of the country, probably Panama, writing the whole thing, Sand said. It's the perfect setup in a perfect movie. Who wouldn't buy it? Kooks, man. Kooks. So, I now go to July 9th of 1998. And this is from the LA Times. There's a quote here. We're not in limbo anymore. Think of how many people never got to find their loved one. This is from only in Hollywood that when a person goes missing, it's not the family who's making a quote. It's that same guy, the publicist, who says that. We're not in limbo anymore. Think of how many people never got to find their loved one. Michael Sands, the guy I just read from his quote saying, oh yeah, he's holed up somewhere. The CIA got him and everything else. Nope. Body may be missing writers. Amateur sleuth's tip leads officials to Gary Devore's truck in the aqueduct near Palmdale. A puzzle that has haunted Hollywood for more than a year. The disappearance of screenwriter Gary Devore was apparently solved Wednesday when an armchair detective, saying he was guided only by a newspaper account of the mystery, led an investigator to Devore's car submerged in an aqueduct near Palmdale with a body still at the wheel. Now, what is an aqueduct? Well, it's one of these. It's kind of a canal or a man-made river. There's many of them in California that lead from the high Sierra Mountains in Northern California the whole way down to LA because it needs so much water. And there's a series of aqueducts, and they run through these cities. And there's one that goes through Palmdale, which is northeast of LA, or more northeast of LA. And Gary and his vehicle ended up in one of those. It's just like saying, like, Esther Westenbarger ended up in a pond. Same kind of thing. Drivers found a partially decomposed body dressed in blue jeans, a Western-style shirt, and cowboy boots matching the clothes worn by Devore when he disappeared. Final confirmation of his identity was pending. Detectives said they believe that Devore died in an accident, but not ruled out foul play. Investigators were led to the spot on the California aqueduct by Douglas Crawford, a San Diego man who said his interest was aroused by a newspaper story. Crawford retraced Devore's last known route, he said, until he came across evidence of a car wreck besides the aqueduct. And remember, he's doing this a year later. So there was evidence a year later that a wreck had occurred on the road that goes over the aqueduct. And emailed his, or this would have been the early days of emailed his discovery Sunday to Devore's publicist, that Michael Sands guy, setting off Wednesday's underwater search. LA County Sheriff's divers found the white Explorer that Devore was driving when he vanished en route to his home in Santa Barbara County from a screenwriting job. The sheriff said Douglas Crawford is not considered a suspect, but simply provided a badly needed break in the case. Our detectives met with him, and they had no reason to doubt what he said. It seems like he did a good job of putting the facts together. Yeah, better than the police. Crawford said that when he read about Devore's disappearance, it struck him as remarkably similar to the story of an Orange County woman who vanished during a trip to Montana some years ago and was later found to have crashed into a California aqueduct. The screenwriter stopped for gas in Fenner, California at about 10:15 p.m. on June 27th of 97 and spoke with his wife by cellular telephone outside of Barstow about 1:15 a.m. From this, Crawford speaking, I deduced that he was traveling in the direction of home and that he had traveled approximately 110 miles since refueling, Crawford said in an email, which was forwarded to investigators. Crawford said that during his July 3rd trip, he stopped at the spot where the Antelope Freeway crosses the California aqueduct. There he found debris matching Devore's Ford Explorer. It was still there a year later. I will continue to say, I know people probably think I'm crazy, but in a lot, and I wouldn't say all, but a lot of Unfound's disappearances, I believe this is true. That there is evidence somewhere that is right in front of our eyes that we just can't see or aren't looking in the right spot, either literally or figuratively. It's right there. And this is one of those examples. Inside Devore's Explorer, detectives found a 35mm camera and a pottery vase, which they believe Devore may have purchased while staying at actress Marsha Mason's home. Investigators said they expected to identify the body through dental records. We know that Mr. Devore was last traveling southbound on the Antelope Freeway. It looks like someone could have come off and landed in the aqueduct. I don't want to speculate, but if anything, he may have been tired. He was traveling straight through from Santa Fe and was early in the morning. Devore, 55, who had screenwriting. I've already gone through that. Wendy Oates Devore said the last conversation she had with her husband began, "Was that you trying to call me, sweetie?" Devore had called by cellular phone as he drove through the high desert toward the couple's beachfront home. What else would it be? Who else would it be at 1 o'clock in the morning? Devore just passed Barstow. Don't wait up, he said. On Wednesday, a grieving Oates Devore said, I assume that it's him. If it is, at least we have found him. That's a very big relief. And it seems that she was given a lie detector test and passed it. So they did take a look at her to make sure that she didn't have anything to do with it. So there you go. But that's not the end of the story. Now, I will read what is on Wikipedia because you might go there. A year later, he and his Ford Explorer were discovered submerged below a bridge over the aqueduct in Palmdale. After police had retrieved the vehicle from the water, it was found that his laptop containing the script titled The Big Steal was missing, as was his gun. Devore's hands were missing. Get to that later. Hand bones were found nearby but could not be conclusively identified as Devore's. The discovery of Devore's vehicle is considered suspicious as the aqueduct was searched shortly after his disappearance was reported and nothing unusual was discovered. I'll come back to that. Police concluded that for Devore to crash his vehicle in this location meant that he would have had to have driven 3 miles against traffic without being seen. This would have been doubly difficult because the vehicle's lights were not switched on. Whereas I will tell you, I don't find that to be odd at all. All right, so what was the main factor in his disappearance? The main factor was a smart person. A person who just took a public account, started thinking about it, maybe even wrote down a kind of timeline type of thing, and maybe knew the area, knew of a disappearance that seemed similar. Remember how I talked so much about that? And decided to drive out there and look for it himself. And guess what? He found evidence that a vehicle, an Explorer, had wrecked in that area. And what do you know? There was the Explorer in the water. Now, what are the contributing factors? Well, the logic worked out. The timeline, we know, is often timelines and routes and everything else, they don't work out. But the logic worked out. The car was on the correct route. We know when it comes to Adventures with Purpose and Chaos Divers, the only way they can do the work that they do and be successful at it is looking for cars on the routes that the cars are supposed to be on. If they don't find the vehicle on that particular route, where do you start looking next? Nobody knows. So it helped that the car was on the correct route and that the body of water was able to be searched. Now, I will tell you, it's very fortunate this wasn't a fast-moving river like the Mississippi, because it very well could have been that a car goes into the water and it floats for a while and gets taken downstream, and then it sinks, and then it becomes very, very difficult. But these aqueducts, although they're like rivers, they do not have the force of rivers. They're not as deep as and powerful as the Mississippi, the Delaware, and everything else. So that certainly helped. Now, let's get to the conspiracy theories, and this is why everyone hates Hollywood. The severe overestimation of Hollywood's own importance. Because after this all happened, as you might have already gleaned from some things that I read, even after he was found in his vehicle, people were still suspicious and did not want to accept that he went into the river all by himself. And as you already stated, could it be that the lights were off and he was traveling in the wrong direction? Well, there was a documentary made called The Writer with No Hands. And the reason it's called that is because when his body was found, he didn't have any hands, but bones were found nearby, although they could not be connected. They looked to be bones from hands, but for some reason, I don't know, DNA or whatever, I don't know if it couldn't be tested or what. This doesn't sound that crazy to me, because what I think happened was he went off the road. What do? You have your hands on the wheel. When you hit the water and the force at which the car stops will break your wrists. It will rip your hands right off. If he was going, whatever the speed limit is, 65, Imagine going 65 and coming to a very abrupt stop while you're holding on to your steering wheel. You're going to break your wrists. That's what you're going to do. And if his wrists get broken, that makes it, and of course with the water, his body is going to deteriorate much faster than if it were in air. Skin would deteriorate, rot away, and the bones, are just free to go wherever they're going to go. Not that crazy to me at all. But if you want to see something, if you want to make it into a conspiracy, into a film, that's what Hollywood does. That's what, of course, a lot of podcasters do. That's what a lot of YouTubers do, because too many people feed into this crap. Now, also, the CIA is front and center of a story from warnings from British director John Irvin, the man behind the BBC spy series based on John le Carre's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. And then the involvement of Chase Braden, Tommy Lee Jones's cousin, who worked in the CIA's clandestine service before becoming the agency's official liaison to the entertainment industry, and who consulted on films such as The Bourne Identity and series such as Alias. So the CIA now was involved. Tommy Lee Jones was involved in this disappearance. Then there's the Panamanian connection that I've already mentioned. Devore was writing a script, The Big Steal, set during the U.S. invasion of Panama that might have blown the doors open on what really happened. Yeah, we know what really happened. Yeah, Manuel Noriega was running drugs and was helping to run drugs, and his banks there were... The Bank of Panama was storing drug dealers' money. All you have to do is watch the movie Blow. Yeah. We know what happened there. There's no mystery there. So, a lot of conspiracy theories. It's one of those things. Yep, they're really sorry that Gary Devore died, but that doesn't mean they aren't going to try to make something of it for their own careers. It is disgusting. And this is why everybody hates Hollywood. So you can check up on that stuff. And I understand there was a podcast series made about all of this that delves into all of this. It sounds to me like whoever put it together believes all this crap. You can go find it for yourself. I would not even listen to 1 second. If you want to go do that, you can do it. So my analysis of this, I think this is just as you would expect. A lot of people driving off the roads these days. Sometimes they go into bodies of water. It's clear to me that Gary Devore was on something. I'm not going to say it was illegal, but it's clear to me that he was on something. If he certainly said pumping adrenaline like his wife said, I'm inclined to believe that he was on speed or something like that. Also, there is the function of what they call in the airline industry get-there-itis. So arthritis, but get-there-itis, in which pilots try to get to their destinations when they shouldn't be, due to something wrong with the plane or something with the weather or whatever else. They just feel, I have to get there. They put pressure on themselves, whether due to company pressure or pride pressure, ego pressure, pressure from the occupants, especially when it happens like private planes. You got these important people in the back. Hey, we need you to land now. We got dinner plans. And there's a very famous private jet that crashed in Vail, Colorado that was like this, where the guy that had chartered the plane was actually in the cockpit saying, yeah, you guys got to land, but it's snowing and everything. Everybody got killed. It's called get-there-itis. And that's why a lot of pilots and people in the planes get killed. Wanting to get somewhere a little too much. I'm guessing this probably had something to do with it as well. Instead of, if he was tired, pull over, get a snooze. But said, I need to get home. And I've been there. How many times have I driven between Florida and Pennsylvania? And sometimes you get tired, and sometimes I will admit I fight through it and you get that second wind. But usually I'm driving during the day when my body is used to being awake. If you're doing that at 3 in the morning and it's dark and you're out there and you're by yourself, that's bad news. Bad news. Your biorhythm's all messed up. We as humans, Homo sapiens, not used to being up at night generally. All creates now a bad situation. Now, of course, most people don't wreck. Most people do make it to their destination, even though they're tired, even though they're out there by themselves or whatever else. And then, once in a while, people don't. But here in the United States, we have millions and millions and millions of people driving. We're going to have this happen. Whereas when you look at a society, a country where driving isn't as prevalent, where, I don't know, they have more of a public transportation system, or they drive bikes, or it's a very small country, whatever you want to say, then that's a lot less likely to happen. Whereas the United States, our car culture, the size of our country, the number of highways we have in this country, it makes it much more likely that something like this is going to happen. Now, you may ask me, well, what about the headlights being off? I don't know. He could have, as he was going into the water, something could have hit the light switch. I'd have to see what the light switch on a 97 Explorer looks like. Is you turn it by hand, or is it you pull the button out? I don't even know. I don't even look. Didn't look. Hard to say. And as far as the police saying, well, they checked that aqueduct, I don't believe that for a second. They say that all the time. They say that all the time. Oh, chaos divers, they find, well, we checked that. They didn't check it. There is no way that any law enforcement agency in the state of California went down into that aqueduct and checked it. They're just saying that to kind of cover their butts, I guess you could say. Well, I don't know. Instead of them just saying, well, we didn't think of that. Well, guess what? We have learned here at Unfound, and of course watching all those YouTube channels, we know police departments don't do this for the most part. Unless it's really, really, really obvious. Otherwise, they don't do it. They're certainly not going to do it for a guy driving from New Mexico to Carpinteria, California. It's crazy. Once again, I'm not pro-law enforcement. I'm not anti-law enforcement. I'm realistic. And realistic means most people are lazy. And when they get caught, like they think that they should have done something or should have solved something and didn't, they start making excuses. Well, we checked it. I don't know. Maybe the thing must have moved or something. I don't know. Now, as far as the allegation that he might have been driving on the wrong side of the road, possible. That's happening all the time here in Tampa. It used to happen all the time in Las Vegas. People doing all sorts of stupid stuff in the middle of the night, not knowing where they're going and everything, especially if they're tired. If they're on something speed, anything is possible. And as far as it could have been suicide, I doubt it. I'm sure they overblew his resume and he was going to be directing this movie because that's what Hollywood people do. I don't know. In contrast to Gregory House, who I certainly do believe walked off on his own and was suicidal. I don't get that idea here. I think just what happened was he just happened to go off the road at the wrong spot. So that is the disappearance to discovery of Gary Devore. I will say it again, I'm not familiar with this disappearance. I'm glad I know it now. Maybe some of you knew about it. Maybe you've even listened to that podcast series that covered his disappearance already and the conspiracy theories and everything. Guy should not have been out there. He should have come home the next day. Get some sleep. Drive home during the day. I don't know if he'd be alive here in 2025, but he wouldn't have died in an aqueduct in Palmdale. There you go. That's this month's Found episode. Gary Devore, and I give all the credit in the world. What was that guy's name? Douglas Crawford, coincidentally in the name of a missing person that we've featured on Unfound. Fantastic work by that guy. Fantastic work. Thank you all for the support. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll do this all again in about 30, 31, 32 days. And that was my Found coverage of the disappearance to discovery of Gary Devore. Coincidentally, and I really do mean that coincidentally, this episode was released on my birthday this year. And I should say, I hope this will entice some of you to become supporters of Unfound at either Patreon or YouTube. Patreon.com/Unfound Podcast at least the $5 a month level. And for YouTube, just hit the join button below any video on Unfound's YouTube channel. At each location, you get more than just these Found episodes. And that's the program. I'm Ed Dentzel, and you've been listening to Unfound.